Her hand was still on the menu when he walked in. Audrey Callwell had not moved in 11 minutes. The waiter had come twice. She had ordered water both times, which was not what she wanted, and she knew it, and she had ordered it anyway, because ordering wine alone at 6:47 in the evening felt like admitting something she was not prepared to admit. The restaurant was called Fenwick's. It was on a corner in the glebe, the kind of place that had been there long enough to feel permanent, with dark wood paneling and a chalkboard menu that changed every few weeks. She had chosen it deliberately. Not impressive enough to seem like she was trying, not casual enough to seem like she didn't care. Neutral ground, which was what she had wanted. Neutral ground, and 1 hour, and then she would go home. That was what she had told herself. 1 hour. She had told herself that before. The man who came through the door at 6:48 did not look like someone who belonged at Fenwick's. He was wearing a canvas jacket that had been washed too many times. His hair was threaded with gray at the temples, cut short and without any particular intention. He was somewhere in his mid-50s, or looked it, with the kind of face that had spent time outdoors and wasn't trying to hide it. He paused inside the door and looked around the room with a stillness that she noticed without meaning to. His name, her colleague Janet had told her, was Conrad Avery. He spotted her before she had decided what to do with her face. He walked over without hurrying. He did not smile right away. He looked at her directly, and then he sat down and he said, "You've been here a while." It was not a question. 15 minutes, she said. I know. He picked up the menu. I was outside for 5 of them. She looked at him. There was a parking situation, he said. I didn't want to come in still thinking about the parking situation. Audrey had been on 7 blind dates in the 3 years since her divorce. Each one had begun with an apology for being late, or an explanation of traffic, or a joke about how hard it was to find the place. She had smiled through all of them. She had learned to smile through all of them. She did not smile this time. She studied him instead. "And are you?" she said, "still thinking about it?" "No," Conrad said. "I'm thinking about whether to get the lamb or the halibut." She looked back at her menu. Something in her chest, which had been held at a particular tension since she'd left the office, loosened by one small degree. "The halibut," she said. "I've been here before, good to know." The waiter came. Conrad ordered the halibut and a glass of the house red without consulting her, which she might have found presumptuous except that he had listened to her, and the halibut was correct. She ordered the same and switched her water to wine. When the waiter left, they sat for a moment in quiet. Audrey was not accustomed to quiet. Her days were structured against it. She ran the Eastern Ontario operations for a mid-sized infrastructure firm, which meant her calendar was blocked in 15-minute increments, and her phone vibrated an average of 40 times before noon. She had built her professional life around the management of noise. The quiet that settled at their table now felt unfamiliar and slightly threatening. "Janet tells me you do restoration work," she said. "Old houses," Conrad said. "Mostly pre-war. Some go back further. How long have you been doing that?" He thought about it, actually thought about it, which was not what people usually did when answering a question like that. 22 years, he said, professionally. Before that, it was just houses I happened to be in. What does that mean? "I grew up in a place that was falling apart," he said. "You learn to fix things out of necessity, or you learn to live with things falling apart." He picked up his wine. I didn't want to live with it. She let that sit. Outside, through the window, the street was wet from an early October rain. A couple walked past under one umbrella, pressed together at the shoulder. "Janet told me you were private," Audrey said. "Janet tells people things," Conrad said, without any particular rancor. "She told me you'd been married. I was. She didn't say what happened." "No," Conrad said. "She wouldn't." He said it simply. Not as a boundary, not as a warning. Simply the way you state a fact about the weather. Audrey had developed a sensitivity over the years to the way people deflected personal questions, the pivot, the deflection wrapped in humor, the counter-question. Conrad did none of those things. He stated what was true and moved on. "My husband and I separated 4 years ago," she said. "Divorced 3 years ago," Janet told me. "Did she tell you anything else?" "She told me you were the most capable person she'd ever worked with," Conrad said, "and that you were very lonely, and that you would probably deny the second part if I mentioned it." The wine glass was halfway to her mouth. She set it down. "She said that. She did. I'm going to have a conversation with Janet. She meant it kindly." I know she did, Audrey said. That doesn't make it better. There was a pause. Then Conrad said, "Are you going to deny it?" She looked at him across the table. His expression was neutral, attentive. He was not trying to provoke her. He was not performing curiosity. He was simply asking. "No," she said, and then wished she hadn't said it so quickly. "I'm not going to deny it. It doesn't mean I wanted it announced." She didn't announce it, she told me. He turned his wine glass slowly on the tablecloth once. "There's a difference. There's a very small difference." "Yes," he said, "there is." The food arrived. They ate. The halibut was good, firm and simply seasoned, the way things at Fenwick's usually were, and for a while they didn't speak about anything personal. He asked about the infrastructure work in a way that made it clear he understood what infrastructure meant, which surprised her. Most people, when she described her work, nodded with a vagueness that told her they had already stopped listening. Conrad asked a specific question about a highway expansion she had referenced in passing, and then another about procurement timelines, and she found herself explaining the actual problem rather than the polished version of it. "You don't work in anything like that," she said. "How do you know what to ask?" "I spent 8 years on municipal contracts," Conrad said. "Before I went private, restoration work for the city, he cut a piece of halibut cleanly. I learned that the real work is always in the thing nobody mentioned in the original proposal." She looked at him. "That's exactly right, I know." It was not arrogant. It was simply accurate, and he knew it was accurate, and he said so. She found unexpectedly that she preferred that to modesty. The waiter cleared their plates. The restaurant had filled while they were eating. The room was warmer now, louder in the way that was pleasant rather than intrusive. "Can I ask you something?" Audrey said. "Yes. Janet said you'd recently come into some money. An inheritance." Conrad looked at her. "She told you that. She mentioned it. She thought it might explain." Audrey stopped. "I'm not sure what she thought it would explain." "Why I do what I do, probably," he said. "Why I haven't scaled up. Why I'm still working houses instead of running a company. Are those questions?" "People assume they should be," he said. He set his fork down. "My uncle died 2 years ago. He'd made a significant amount of money over his life and left most of it to a few people, including me. What I did with it is my business. What I didn't do with it is also my business. I wasn't asking what you did with it." "I know," he said. "I'm telling you anyway." He was quiet for a moment. She waited. "I kept doing the houses," he said, "because the money doesn't change what I'm good at. It changes what I can ignore. Those are different things." Something in the way he said it made her very still. She had spent most of her adult life equating financial security with permission. Permission to move, to choose, to stop accommodating things that didn't work. The divorce had been partly about that. The years before the divorce had been entirely about that. She had worked toward a kind of financial autonomy that she had privately thought of as the right to simply be difficult, which was unfair to herself but also partially accurate. The idea that someone might have access to that autonomy and choose to go on exactly as before, not out of paralysis, not out of habit, but because the work was the point, landed somewhere in her chest in a way she had not expected. "How long were you married?" she asked. 14 years. Children?" "One, daughter. She's 26 now. Does she live nearby?" "Brampton," he said. "She works in logistics. Comes for dinner about once a month." He picked up his wine. "She brings containers of food she's made and leaves them in my fridge and pretends she's just visiting." Audrey almost smiled. "She's worried about you." "She's been worried about me since she was 9, Conrad said. "I've learned to accept it." "What happened at 9? He looked at the window. Outside, the rain had started again, light and persistent. "Her mother got sick," he said. "It took 4 years. My daughter understood more than we wanted her to." The table went quiet. Audrey had not expected that. Janet had said divorced, not widowed. She looked at Conrad, and he was not looking at her with the expression of someone who had disclosed something difficult on purpose. He had simply answered the question she asked. "I'm sorry," she said. "Thank you," he said, without flinching. She was a good person. It was a hard end. He said it like someone who had arrived, after a long time, at a place where the sentence no longer broke him, not because he had stopped feeling it, but because feeling it was now something he had learned to carry without needing to put it down in front of other people. She picked up her wine. "My marriage ended," she said after a moment, "because we had become very efficient with each other." Conrad looked at her. We never fought, she said. We never made each other unhappy in any particular way. We had arrived at a kind of management of the relationship. We managed it, and one day I looked at the calendar on the fridge and I thought, I could tell exactly what this year will look like, and the year after, and the year after that. She turned her glass, and I realized that what I had built was very secure and completely airless. Conrad was quiet for a moment. What did he say, he asked, when you told him? He said he'd been waiting for someone to say it first. Conrad exhaled slowly. Not quite a laugh, something gentler. That's sad, he said. It is, she agreed. We're friendly now. It's almost worse somehow, because you're still managing. She looked at him. Yes, she said. Exactly that. The waiter came and asked about dessert. They both declined, and then Conrad asked for the check before she could, which she did not comment on. When it arrived, he looked at it for a moment. There's a place on Wellington that does a proper slice of pie, he said. Nothing elaborate. They've been there about 30 years. I go there sometimes after a job, when I don't want to cook. She looked at him. It's 20 minutes on foot, he said. If you don't want to walk in the rain, they also have terrible coffee to go. He was not pressing. He was not performing nonchalance either. He was simply telling her about a place he liked and leaving the space for her to decide what to do with that information. She had planned for 1 hour. It was now 8:43. The coat was still on the back of her chair. She had not moved it once during dinner. She thought about the calendar on the fridge, the managed years, the airless, secure, perfectly arranged years. She thought about the way she had ordered water twice because ordering wine alone felt like admitting something. She thought about the parking situation he had needed to finish thinking about before he came inside. I don't mind the rain, Audrey said. He paid without making an event of it. She put on her coat. They went out into the October evening, where the rain was still coming down in a way that was almost pleasant if you weren't in a hurry. She was not in a hurry. They walked south toward Wellington, not quite side by side. There was a careful, respectful distance between them, the kind of distance that was not unfriendly, but was still measuring itself. He did not offer his umbrella. He had not brought one. She had left hers at the office 3 days ago and not gone back for it. Do you take on apprentices? She asked, as they crossed Glendale. Occasionally, he said. Why? I'm curious about the work. What draws someone to it, to restoration specifically, to something that requires you to understand what was there before? He thought about that. The rain pattered against the pavement around them, and the streetlights turned the puddles copper and gold. There's a satisfaction in it, he said finally. You come into a place that's been neglected or damaged or just used past its capacity, and you don't try to make it into something new. You try to understand what it was trying to be, and then you help it get there. He glanced at her sideways. Most people want to renovate, tear out the original and replace it with something cleaner, and you don't. I think the original is usually worth the effort, he said. She let that sit between them as they walked. The pie place was exactly as described. It was narrow and warm, with 4 stools at a counter and 2 small tables against the wall. There was a hand-lettered menu on a whiteboard and a woman behind the counter who greeted Conrad by name and then looked at Audrey with the frank, brief assessment of someone who had known him a long time and was noting the presence of a new variable. This is Audrey, Conrad said. Dorothy, the woman said and shook her hand briskly. Sit wherever. The butter tart is tonight's. They sat at the counter. The coffee was, as advertised, terrible, thin and slightly scorched, the kind that had been on the burner too long. She drank it anyway. You're a regular, she said. She knew my wife, he said simply. That's why I keep coming back. She looked down at her coffee cup. There were things she had wanted to say since the restaurant, things she had been organizing in the back of her mind in the efficient way that she organized most things. Points of connection, useful disclosures, the conversational equivalent of a well-prepared agenda. She found now that she did not want to say any of them. What she wanted, she realized, was simply to stay at this counter a little longer, to drink the scorched coffee and listen to the rain and let the evening be what it was becoming rather than what she had intended it to be. She's assessing me, Audrey said quietly, meaning Dorothy. Yes, Conrad said. Does she do that with everyone you bring here? He was quiet for a beat. I haven't brought anyone here before. She looked at him. His expression was steady. Not confessional, not strategic. He had said it because it was true, and he had decided she was someone he could be accurate with. Dorothy set 2 plates down. The butter tarts were small and dark at the edges, the filling still slightly warm. Audrey took a bite and understood immediately why he came back. "These are very good," she said. "Yes," he said. "You could have led with this. I wanted to see if we'd get here first," he said. She looked at him. He was watching her with something that was not quite a smile, something quieter than a smile, and more considered. Outside, the rain had softened to mist. Through the narrow window above the counter, she could see the street lights blurring at their edges, the wet pavement reflecting the shop signs across the road in long amber stripes. She thought about her apartment, 6 kilometers away, where the lights were on timers, and there was always something clean to eat, and nothing was ever out of place. She thought about the meetings tomorrow, the procurement call at 9, the site visit in Kingston that she had been meaning to reschedule. She thought about the conversation she would have to have with Janet on Monday, and whether it would be the kind of conversation where she irritated or the kind where she was grateful. She suspected she already knew. "I run most mornings," she said, "if the weather isn't impossible." Conrad glanced at her. "There's a trail along the river," she said. "I've been running it alone for about 2 years. "Ah," he said. "I'm not asking you to run with me," she said. "I don't know you well enough for that." "No," he said. "I'm just telling you something true." "I know," he said. "Thank you." Dorothy came back and refilled the terrible coffee without being asked. She looked at them both with the expression of someone who has seen enough of things to know when not to interrupt, and then she went back to the far end of the counter and began wiping down the pastry case. "I have a house in Merrickville," Conrad said. "About an hour out. I've been working on it for 3 years. It was built in 1887. Your own house?" "Yes. Is it habitable?" "Most of it," he said. "The east wing less so." "East wing," she said. "It's not as grand as it sounds. It was a farmhouse with pretensions." He turned his coffee cup. "The previous owners tried to modernize it in the 70s. I've been undoing the damage 3 years to undo the 70s. Some decades do more harm than others." She pressed her lips together. "Do you live there full time? When I'm not on a job?" He paused. "It's quiet. I've gotten used to quiet." She thought about what quiet meant to her now. The managed apartment, the deliberate silences, the quiet that was the absence of something rather than a presence of its own. She thought about the kind of quiet that a house built in 1887 might hold, the creaking, inhabited kind, the quiet of something that had lasted. "I'd like to see it," she said. "The house." She had not planned to say that. Conrad looked at her. "When?" "I don't know yet," she said. "Not this weekend. I have Kingston." "No," he said. "Not this weekend." "But I'd like to," she said. "If the offer stands," he said. They finished the coffee. Dorothy said goodnight and meant it. They went out into the mist, which had thinned further and now felt more like cool air than actual rain. At the corner of Wellington and Percy, he said goodnight. He did not make any gesture toward another meeting. He did not exchange numbers in a way that felt like a transaction. He looked at her directly, the way he had when he first sat down, and said, "Thank you for the halibut recommendation." She almost laughed. It came up before she could decide whether to let it. "Thank you for the butter tart," she said. He nodded once. Then he turned and went back up Wellington toward wherever he had parked. She stood on the corner for a moment. The city was quiet around her in the way October nights in Ottawa were quiet, not empty, but settled. A couple walked a dog on the far side of the road. Somewhere down the block, a restaurant was letting a late group out, their voices rising and then fading. She thought about the house in Merrickville. The east wing less so. 3 years of undoing the damage 1 decade had managed to do. She thought about what he had said on the walk over, that the original was usually worth the effort, that most people wanted to tear out what was there and start clean, that he had learned instead to understand what a thing was trying to be before he decided how to help it. The light at the corner changed. She started walking.